Ross and Kristin with RiskScout, I'll turn it over to you. And Kayla, thank you very much for that. It was awesome.
Thanks, Mandi. Guys, I am Kristin Parker. I work for RiskScout. And for those of you who don't know who RiskScout is, which you probably don't, we're kind of the software behind banks that help them run hemp banking programs, cannabis banking programs, any type of higher risk industry. I'm not saying that hemp is high risk, but that's the perception in some cases. So regulators in the banking land have certain expectations for banks to adhere to. So my role at RiskScout is to direct the compliance efforts, and that includes educating institutions all over the United States on how to bank hemp. It's including how to bank hemp with regulators, like educating the regulatory space. That is where the hesitancy comes from with these institutions. They're scared of their regulators. They don't want to step in. They're risk averse, right? They don't want to step into a territory they're not familiar with. So it's my job at RiskScout to help institutions understand the industry, to really provide that education piece, and then be the software behind it to help them streamline the processes for onboarding these customers. You guys probably already all know Ross Sloan because he's the bee's knees and everybody in the industry really likes him. But Ross and I have a long history of, as long as hemp has been legal, we've been trying to get it banked. It's simply put, we started both at Home Trust Bank right after the Farm Bill passed. That was in December 2018, I believe. And then by April 2019, we had launched the very first Federal Reserve Bank approved hemp program in the United States in that institution. So that took a lot of effort and time because there was no regulatory guidance out there for banks. There was little education for bankers. So it took a lot of going through legislation pieces by myself, trying to pick and choose what we needed to do as a bank to safeguard our institution, as well as try to provide as much banking opportunities for you guys that there are. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Ross, I'll let him give you a little bit of his background.
Okay, thank you, Kristin, and just a thank you to Mandi and the whole team at GHA. I learned something new on every one of these calls. I certainly hope today is no different for the rest of you. And really the networking opportunities that GHA has provided for all of us have just been fantastic. So thank you to Mandi and the whole team. Glad to be with you all today. My role with Westtown Bank and Trust is SVP of Hemp Banking. We're one of the few banks in the country that actually has a hemp vertical, and my role is exclusively in hemp. I spend all my time working with hemp related businesses throughout the country. We fortunately have built our domain of customers in the hemp industry to over 200, and we add to that on a weekly basis, and are really committed to the industry to the point where we went out and trademarked the phrase hemp banks here. We wanted to send a clear message to the industry that we are committed to it and here to stay. And I'm delighted to be presenting today with Kristin, not only because of our personal friendship, but also because of our connection, the connection between our two companies. Westtown, I think, rightfully determined that it would be smart for us to work with a group of professionals to help us with our compliance due diligence. And so we established the relationship with RiskScout, and it's been a great relationship. And so again, very, very glad to be able to present today with Kristin and RiskScout. So Kristin, with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I was thinking earlier today about how deeply involved I've been in trying to educate this hemp industry, or just hemp in general, right? And to the point where when I go to type in the word help on my on my computer or my phone, my fingers naturally go to the word hemp. It's like, it's just like comes out that way. So if that tells you how much I'm involved with him, that should tell you something. You know, even my first photo in my office was the first woman-owned hemp farm that I ever went to. So I do love this industry. I'm fighting for you guys. And I think it's good for you guys to understand from a banker's perspective what it takes to build a hemp banking program, maintain a banking program, and really how you should protect yourself as a business by banking with the right institution. So let me walk you through this, and you know, feel free to ask as many questions as you guys want, because I'm an open book here.
Well, and real quick, for those of you, you can raise your hand down at the bottom if you're new to Zoom, or feel free to just unmute yourself. It will show up on our screen and we can call on you. If you would rather type your question in the end, you're welcome, or in the comments, you're welcome to do that too. And both Ross and Kristin will be able to see it.
Yeah. So on today's agenda, I thought we'd, you know, again, explain what banks have to do to bank hemp. You know, it's not that banks really hate you. They just may not understand you, right? It's your banker doesn't hate you. They just truly they may not even know you exist in their footprint, to be honest. So we're going to talk about self-advocating for the hemp industry, best practices for ensuring you're banking with the right banker credit union, and then discuss complying with your bank's ongoing due diligence efforts. So in the banking space, we are all regulated by some regulatory agency that every institution all over the United States is. There's about 5 different regulatory agencies. There's anywhere from the OCC to state regulators, and any bank can pick, they pay into the system to pick who is going to be their regulator. And those regulatory agencies have a booklet really that tells banks how to bank certain industries. And some industries naturally fall into what's considered a higher risk industry. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's usually that people fall into that category because it's mostly just misunderstood businesses, right? There's not enough education for the industry to, or for us bankers to really understand the industry. And this has happened historically with money service businesses, ATM businesses, third-party payment providers, you name it. If there's not enough education out there, it's usually deemed higher risk, or there is maybe potential risk for illicit activity. In the case of hemp, it's considered higher risk because you know, it teeter-totters that line of falling into the world of, you know, you have your 0.3 THC level. And if we even exceed that a little bit, that kicks in different regulatory expectations for banks, because at that point it's considered THC cannabis for marijuana. And banks have different expectations for the marijuana industry than they do the THC, or they do the hemp industry. So both banks and credit unions must be able to demonstrate that they have a comprehensive understanding of the hemp industry to their regulators and key stakeholders. I say that, but what we're finding is that we are charged with understanding the industry, but the regulators don't understand it. So we have kind of are seeing all over the country different feedback from different regulators on hemp programs because they don't really understand it. They know enough to be dangerous. So that's hence the effort we're making at going to each of these regulatory agencies and holding a series of training sessions so that they really truly understand the industry and what the true risks are that are involved with it. So this includes understanding known or perceived risks associated with the industry. It includes defining their risk tolerance. So that includes saying, I either want to bank, you know, this number of clients. Maybe I only want to bank growers and processors and not retailers. It can, you know, that word risk threshold can mean a lot of things. And then they must be able to define their risk mitigation strategies to address the known or perceived industry risks that they've identified. So they need to be able to have a way to show, let's just say, for example, they need to be able, if their risk that they've identified is that growers may grow a crop over 0.3 THC, then they need a way to mitigate that risk for their institution. And that may be through collecting COAs. Ross, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think that's well covered. I would reiterate your point about the regulators really in a lot of ways learning from those of us in the banking industry about the industry and how it relates to banking. And I think, I don't want to speak for other banks, but I do think some banks will become more comfortable in the industry when there is some standardization of expectations from regulators. I think that just gives an added level of confidence to banks if they feel like their regulators understand it. And to your point, Kristin, I think we're still in that phase where we, in some ways, are kind of educating the regulators. And the only other point I would make there is they are not going to generally dictate to us what our policies have to be, as long as they feel like our policies are within reason. And most importantly, I think, as long as we are following the program that we have presented to them. Where we can really have some problems with regulators is if we tell them that our program is going to be administered in a certain way, and then we deviate significantly or consistently from that.
Right. One thing I think, just to touch back on that last slide just for a second, is banks and credit unions all over the US are now being told by their regulators that they need, you know, if they're saying they're not banking hemp, they have to prove that they're not banking hemp. And it's a lot of times it's harder to prove that you're not banking something than it is just to bank the industry. So we're really putting that in banks' heads through communications to say, if they say, well, I'm not banking that, we say, well, yeah, you probably are, and you just don't know it. A, and B, if you're not, it still has to be addressed in your policies and your procedures. And once they start to work through that and they realize it's harder to not bank it than it is just to bank it, we're seeing a lot of more openness to the industry in that. So that's, I feel positive in that aspect for the hemp industry there. And one thing I do try to educate a lot bankers on a lot is that these are just, you guys are just really misunderstood businesses, right? Once you start to get to know it deep down inside, 99.9% of what the players in this industry are not in it to do nefarious activity. You wouldn't do that under a heavily regulated and licensed industry. So once the institution has addressed all of the bullet points on the previous slide, they must obtain approval from the following parties prior to launching a hemp banking program. So this is their executive leadership team, CEO, CFO, all those guys, board of directors, and their governing regulatory body. So the board of directors is really where some of these programs can get derailed. And a lot of times that's because, again, they don't understand the industry, or they associate hemp with THC cannabis side. You know, they immediately see that leaf and they're like, oh, Woodstock, you know, like I was a bad kid back in the days there. I can't be promoting this at my institution, without understanding that the industry is much more diverse than that. So the governing of the regulatory body, they have to get approval from them. That's their regulator. So the regulator can't really tell them they can or cannot start a program unless that bank is in trouble from a regulatory perspective. Maybe they had a bad exam that they have to pay attention to, shoring up some other issue at their institution before they're allowed to go into this program.
Yeah, and Kristin, the only thing I would add to that slide is that you know, Caleb mentioned earlier having had a banking relationship with a bank for years, and then all of a sudden they were not comfortable because they saw the word hemp on a website. And I think the chances of that happening are significantly higher when the stakeholders that you just talked about are not involved on the front end. That where you don't have all of those stakeholders involved on the front end, that's where you get somebody, as Kayla said, on the back end, discovering that they're banking hemp businesses, and all of a sudden you get a phone call or a letter saying you need to find another bank.
Right, right. So the reason some institutions don't bank hemp is because it's out of their risk tolerance that they've defined. Maybe they're more risk averse and just don't want to focus on this industry. They don't have the necessary resources because it either does take extra staffing or it does take software to run this, because there is ongoing due diligence that has to occur at institutions with these hemp businesses. Or again, circling back to, they don't have a proper understanding of the industry, so they just say, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. And then again, they may be just prohibited from doing it because their regulators, maybe they have a cease and desist order to do any of this type of stuff. Another huge piece that I can't stress enough is that there is a very much a gap of hemp banking education out there for bankers. You know, we have made great strides at RiskScout of getting out there in front of institutions to really get out there and educate these guys and provide them resources to understand how they can bank the industry. You know, who are the different players in the industry? What are the perceived risks associated and how to mitigate those risks? But again, it always boils down to, I don't know what I don't know. And that seems to be one of the biggest pain points. There's little how-tos out there that exist, and traditional soft banking software it's not designed to bank the industry. So if they're, traditional compliance tools don't have all the pieces of the puzzle that they need to bank the industry, meaning they either have to do it manually, which I did for a little bit, and I would never wish that upon my worst enemy because it's hard, or they have to really beef up staffing, or they have to invest in software to do it.
Yeah, Kristin, I would just add, to me, that may be the most important slide in the deck. And there's a lot of talk, and I think rightfully so, about the importance of the Safe Banking Act. We do need that legislation, but I think even more than legislation in the banking industry, we need education. I've told a number of people that passage of the Safe Banking Act is not going to immediately give bankers knowledge that they didn't previously have. And so I think the legislation is important, but even more so is education to get the comfort level in our banking industry to bank hemp-related businesses.
Yep, 100%. So I can't stress enough how important self-advocating for the hemp industry is with your institution. A lot of times, the best education I got were from businesses like you guys. My neighbor 2 doors down, he has a hemp farm here. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, and he has a hemp farm, several miles from us, and I just soaked it in. He took me there, and I was able to really understand the industry so much better by being in person. I really encourage you to get out there and offer education to your banks. Let them know that you're here to help them understand the industry. I still have what I like to call phone a friends in the industry that I banked at Home Trust that I now call upon when I have a question about how the industry is evolving. And I have a grower, and I have a processor, and I have a retailer, and so that's because I took the time, and those businesses took the time to come to us as a bank to say, we're here. What can we do to help you better understand the industry? And we really fostered those relationships. Ross?
Don't know that I can add anything to that.
And again, I can't stress enough is that bankers can be very guilty of not realizing that certain businesses exist in their footprint. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to banks and they're like, Yeah, we don't have any of those businesses in our footprint, and I pull a map up and I show them that there's tons of them, that, and I'm not going to give them the names in case they run them and want to go kick them out. But I'm saying is these guys are here, and this, if my philosophy always has been, if you're a community bank, you should be banking your community, right? And that includes taking the time to understand the businesses that are in your community and really assessing whether or not they fit your risk appetite. So this is a huge piece for me that I can't stress enough about understanding who you're banking with and making sure it's the right institution. Institutions, there's lots of different things that can happen at a bank, right? There are really, there's sales guys that maybe don't, trying to reach your goals, don't understand how that this industry needs to be treated different than perhaps a grocery store, and are just onboarding businesses without there being a formal hemp program in place. Those businesses, when that happens, that it's oftentimes not good news for the hemp business, right? Because later those businesses are found and then they end up being shut down. If your institution is not asking any questions about the operation of your business, it is likely that they're not running their program like they are expected to run from a regulatory expectation. And because of that, the risk of your relationship being closed is high. Or opposite, they do have a hemp banking program, but they're not running it correctly per expectations, right? So maybe every key stakeholder knows, but they're not conducting the right due diligence. And I will tell you that I talked to an institution maybe about a month ago that was kind of hand waving the industry, like, yeah, we bank them here, but we're not really doing anything extra, and had a regulatory finding from them, which in the banking world, when you have a regulatory finding, they have to be addressed, and a lot of times they come with fines for that institution and a lot of work, and you just don't want to be in that boat as a bank. And then the other thing is the institution openly advertising their hemp banking program? If they aren't, it could be likely that the commitment isn't really there. Are they really invested into this program, or are they dipping their toes enough just to see what they could get in the door? And if they don't, get the results that they were thinking they were going to get, close the program down. I've seen that happen. I've lived that life, and it's devastating when it happens. And I don't want to see any of you guys go through that. So Ross, you got anything to add in that?
I do. Thank you, Kristin. I would just add that it's important to distinguish between a hemp-friendly banker and a hemp-friendly bank. And what I mean by that is I talk to people, as do my associates, every week, that will call us and say, I thought everything was fine with my bank. I was completely transparent about what I was doing. My local banker knew I was in the hemp business, but now I've got 2 weeks to find another bank. And that's a scenario where the person had a hemp-friendly banker, maybe somebody that knew them, maybe even understood the hemp industry to some degree, was comfortable with the customer, but they were working for a bank that was not a hemp-friendly bank, didn't have the buy-in of the stakeholders that we talked about earlier. And I think the things that Kristin mentioned here is a good way to suss that out and determine if you're truly banking with a hemp-friendly bank or just a person that is hemp-friendly but not working with a hemp-friendly institution. And the other thing I would add is not only around marketing and advertising, but Kristin talked about keying in the word hemp earlier. If you do a search for the word hemp on a bank's website and it comes up with nothing, then you need to really be asking yourself if it's truly a hemp-friendly bank.
Yep. The last thing here is the institution charging fees. If they are not charging you fees, then it is likely that it is highly suspect. It's expensive for banks to bank hemp because of all the regulatory expectations. the regulatory expectations, they expect you to, again, either have staffing or software. Those things cost money, you know, and they take time, and you know, time equals money, I guess is a good way to put it. So if they are not charging you fees, you know, if they're not a credit union, then credit unions are different. We're actually working with a credit union that is in the process of launching a hemp banking program, only for their tiny footprint, that have decided not to charge fees. That's you know, they're finding other ways to make that up. You know, but at the end of the day, it does cost money to make these guys, and it usually is passed on somewhat, at least, to the customer. If they're not charging fees, they either haven't assessed the program correctly, or they're not running it correctly, or again, they may not actually have one, and you're just dealing with a friendly hemp banker, not a bank that's friendly to him. Right.
That's a good point. Banker and bank.
Yep. And then complying with your institution's expectations. I cannot stress this enough. As a banker, as somebody who works in compliance, who's usually considered a stick in the mud, right? My job as somebody who would approve these relationships into an institution, I was really putting myself on the line there, right? I was saying, I chose to allow you into this institution now. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. So when I need information, I need you to comply with it in a timely manner. I was never hesitant to have those conversations. You have a lot of bankers who aren't that transparent with their customers, and it may just because they are not comfortable having those conversations, or they just don't know that they should. But your bankers should be setting expectations with you from the beginning that there is going to be some information collection that happens after you onboard on some type of reoccurring basis. So some examples of information an institution will expect at the time of application, and updated and revalidated on some type of reoccurring cadence, usually annually, would be business information, including your beneficial owners, your key parties, vendor relationships, business operation document, including your licensing information, maybe your latest COA testing, so on and so forth.
Yeah, Kristin, the only thing I would add there is that, you know, every one of our customers is important to us, and we want to accommodate them and make the relationship as easy as possible. But we do not want to put our whole program in jeopardy, where we would be unable to help all of our customers. And so if a banker is pushing really hard for information and is unwilling to waive that, it generally is because they know that the ongoing hemp banking program is dependent upon us getting the kind of information that we've promised our regulators we would get. And so I just encourage people to take a big picture view of that. We're not trying to be heavy-handed. We're just trying to ensure that we can continue to offer the services to all of our customers.
Yeah, two things that the regulators expect from a banker is that they truly understand the industry, but also that they know their customers. We're charged with really knowing our customers, and we've even been asked to know our customers' customers. Now, you know, does that cross the, you know, kind of heavy-handed? Is that heavy-handed? Yeah, somewhat. But at the same time, these expectations are in place to safeguard the financial integrity of you know, the whole banking system in general. You know, it's hard as I understand, being in the hemp industry, that it's hard to understand the why behind these questions. But when, again, to reiterate, whatever we've written in our policies, we have to prove that we're doing so. When a regulator comes in to examine a bank, they pick a handful of sampled customers out of the portfolio. So when they go to Westtown Bank, they're going to choose 20 customers out of their 200 to examine, to make sure that Westtown has actually done what they said they were going to do per their policy. So that's where those expectations come in for us to know our customers, which is why you may get questions that you just are like, I don't understand why they even care. but I promise you there's a reason for it. It's not that we're trying to get out there and get you. It's because we just truly want to understand what you're doing. Some examples of what your institution may be asking for. Producers and growers are a really good example. A lot of our institutions will send out what we call is a checkpoint, which is just a quick questionnaire to their growers to say in the springtime, to say, hey, what are you growing this spring or throughout this season? How many acres are you growing? What seeds are you going to be using? So on and so forth, to get a good understanding of what the business does. And then maybe late fall, early winter, check back in with them again through that another short questionnaire that says, can we just have a copy of each of your state testing COA results? Just so they can kind of check that box and say, yep, we made sure this wasn't over the 0.3 THC level and move on. The other example would be brick and mortar. Sometimes our institutions will ask for a list of their products and then pick a handful of vendors out of there and ask for one COA from each vendor, just to again verify that everything falls within the legal limit that they're allowed to bank. Anything there, Ross?
That's well covered. Thank you.
I just got an email from Betsy telling me that I'm working on Costa Rica time to get that form filled out. So I will get it back to you guys because I own those.
You better hurry up.
Like, because for me, and this was something in banking, and as you're speaking, I understand it, and talking to Betty, I understand it, but it was like some of it's very irrelevant to me, but because I'm a geek, and so just understanding what's required as a simple, NA versus, submitting COA. But yeah,
and what is nice about the institutions that use the RiskScout software is we can customize down into per industry sector so that people aren't having to go in and answer tons and tons of questions that are irrelevant to them. It's all about trying to streamline things. Everything that we've done in our software is meant to be, really efficient and effective so that you guys as, farmers or processors or hemp associations can just answer a question really quickly from your phone or your tablet, whatever, and just get and send it back to your bank and move on and do your business that you really want to be doing, at least annually, sometimes a little bit further out for banks that are pushing the line a little bit, I guess you'd say. But at least annually, you're going to be asked to update this information on this slide with your institution. So maybe, who are your shareholders? Has your business operation changed? Because we all know in the hemp industry, like when we started in 2019, Ross and I, we would have one business that was a grower, and then by their 6-month review would come up and they were already a vertical. They had expanded quickly or they'd merged with somebody else. So that's another reason that they're going to be asking for updated information, because we know this industry moves pretty quickly. Here are some red flags that would cause an institution to be alarmed. These are no-nos. Don't do these, okay? That's all I ask of you guys is if I had to pick 4 things for you not to do, don't do these, okay? Not providing important documents that serve to verify your business. I know this industry is sometimes owned by a business that owns a business that owns another business that, just be as transparent as possible and let the bank know anything that would be relevant to identifying who you are as a business, who's really your key shareholders, get down to really who the beneficial owners is here. Claims of efficacy. Banks are reviewing websites. They're reviewing to make sure that you don't have claims of efficacy on there. And it boils down to even the simplest statements too. They may seem so dumb, like say goodbye to pain. That's an absolute statement. That's technically against what the FDA allows. Be careful about the language you're putting on your websites. It may not be a reason for them not to bank you, but they will probably poke at you a little bit, ask you to reword that information. Questionable or missing COAs. We know that there's not much consistency in COAs. And we've also seen ones that are not real before. So it's important that you, if you have COAs, maybe provide them a little information on the company that ran your testing results if it wasn't by the state. And then absence of required disclosures. Guys, put the FDA disclosure on your website. Just, it could be as simple as possible. And then some things, not on this slide, maybe perhaps on the next, is some states are requiring age verification. Just if you are an e-commerce business, ensure that you've done your research to know that the states you're selling to or the states you're operating in, whether or not they require age verification or not, and to include that when we do. Ross, anything there?
Covers it well. Thank you.
And then again, I can't urge you enough to be transparent. Your financial institution is taking a calculated risk by choosing to bank the hemp industry. So just, be upfront with them. The more honest you are, the more likely the relationship's going to go well. And then again, you must be prepared to answer a request for information when asked in a timely manner and provide supporting documentation for those answers when you're asked. We see a lot of weird wire activity to places like that aren't, you wouldn't think that the hemp industry is sending money to, there may be legitimate reasons before that, but we may be asking you questions about the purpose of the wire and then maybe supporting documentation to support your answer that you gave. And then just so you guys are aware, obviously Westtown Bank banks the hemp industry. Our company, RiskScout, originally started out as Veraleaf. Veraleaf was meant to just help banks bank the hemp industry. We've since expanded out because our software can help banks bank multiple industries, but Veraleaf still exists, and it is a good resource to go in and look at institutions that maybe, if you're looking for one that has brick and mortar locations, ones that are closer to your location, that there's institutions on this website that are also hemp friendly for you to explore. But you should definitely bank with Westtown Bank first, obviously.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, and before we go to questions, I do, and I want to save time for questions, but I do want to acknowledge a couple of my teammates that are on the call. I'm not going to put them on the spot and make them speak, but like any company, it's all about working with great people. And so I want to acknowledge a couple of teammates on the call. Ashley Andrews, who is a business development officer in our hemp vertical. Ashley and I are typically the first points of contact for hemp related businesses that we work with. And Ashley is a certified cannabis banking professional and has been a great addition to our team. We added her in November. And then Tom Lanine, Mandi, Tom. Tom is the director of Westtown Payments. We realized there was a huge void in the credit card processing space for the hemp industry. And so in late 2020, we established Westtown Payments as an affiliate, and now we're able to provide merchant services to businesses in the hemp industry. And a lot of folks like having the deposit relationship and merchant services in one place. So won't put them on the spot, but I do want to acknowledge two great teammates that are on the call.
Well, and I would love to also say you guys have been great as a team coming onto our calls and being available. I see you on the calls often, and welcome all of you that are on here to please reach out to them if you need anything. How do people get in touch with you, Ross and Kristin and Ashley? Tom, you want to put your contact info in the chat so that anybody on the call can reach out to you?
Be glad to do that. Yeah.
And then I had a couple of questions. I don't know if you're, and then I saw Tom or Tim has a question as well. Kristin, I don't know.
Yeah, I see Tim's question here. And Tim, you're right. And I don't want there to be confusion here for those that have dug that deep into the banking regulation language. With the hemp industry, you don't have to file suspicious activity reports, right? The suspicious activity reports, for people who don't know what that is that's a way of banks communicate to, I guess, basically law enforcement of any type of potentially suspicious activity. We're required to do that per right after it's a couple different regulations, but really after 9/11, it really kicked in. Right. There are certain with THC cannabis marijuana industry, because it's federally illegal. No matter if that business is doing something nefarious or not, the bank is required to report a suspicious activity report. They state in their reports that this business isn't doing anything wrong, and it just goes into a black hole and dies, right? It used to be that we had to file them on hemp businesses too, because when it was federally illegal. We've been told we don't have to do that anymore, and banks are not no longer filing suspicious activity reports on hemp. That is not what is taking the time up of institutions. It's all of the due diligence they have to continue to do with these businesses after they onboard, to ensure that they're not doing something potentially nefarious that require a suspicious activity report. Does that make sense for non-bankers?
No. All they have to do is produce a license. It states that in the U.S. Treasury's bulletin. All we have to do as a license holder is take it to the bank, say this is what the answer is to the question. We're a license holder, and then we go back to work in the agricultural industry producing industrial hemp. The bank is telling the community, we don't know, and I'm telling the community that the U.S. Treasury said this is the case. I've heard again today the point made that the regulators require it. It's $18,000 a year, folks. They don't require it. The bank is saying you might be lying to me. I'm not. I'm a license holder. Go back to work. It's discriminatory otherwise. Thank you.
Tim, I want to, first off, hey, how are you? I want to make sure I'm clear. Are you asking if we or let me restate that. Are you thinking that we are saying that we are required to file SARs on hemp businesses?
Yes, I'm saying that I've heard once again today that the government regulators require us to do diligence, including this SAR, which costs the bank money. I heard that point made by the speaker. And I'm suggesting that only reason is because the bank takes that position, not because it's required by the regulator. And she just said it.
No.
Let me see if I can clarify that. First off, as Kristin said, we are not required to file SARs on hemp businesses any more than we are on any other industry. In any industry, if there's specific,
before December of 2019, I think that you would have been, according to my educated position on it. The government, including the Treasury, came out in December and said this is no longer required.
Yeah, I'm talking about now. We are not required to file SARs on hemp-related businesses any more than we would be any other business. Now, of course, in any industry, if there's suspicious activity, whatever the industry is, then we would be required to file it.
But the time
we're not in that category with respect.
Yeah, and that's not.
You're not, but we're not following them. So I'm a little.
We're just suggesting that we still have to do the diligence. We still have to make sure. We still have to be able to answer the question that you're not. It's been stated in the call. I think it's recorded. So I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. If you wanted to, I just want to get to the bottom of it. I've been told not to bank here. I've been told not to bank here. And I've also been told it's $18,000 every year of actual money that I would end up paying if I brought the check from a hemp-related business activity. We could be making hempcrete blocks in Ohio. And I've been told that it would cost 1.5% for every check deposited until we got to $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year of bureaucracy. Basically, you're talking about people that are making hemp blocks as a extreme example. It's only my position is that the only reason this is required is the bank is taking the position that we might not be getting the truth. And I'm telling you that what it seems like we ought to be able to do is just present the license. And if we're not telling the truth, we'll be sued. We have insurance for it. And it's just, it, in my mind, is a matter of stigmatizing the folks that are not criminals. And you're suggesting we have to prove that we aren't criminals.
Tim,
Yeah,
I think.
let me see if I can clarify some of that for you. That first off, the $18,000, I don't know where that number's coming from. And our monthly fee for hemp related businesses is $100 a month. So I don't know where the $18,000 figure comes from. The other is, as Kristin said earlier, we present a compliance program to our regulators. They give us some leeway about what that's going to look like, but they expect us to follow what is in that program. And I, don't forget that there are very few banks in the industry, and that's largely because of the added compliance requirements that banks feel like they have to have in place in order for it to be done safely. I can promise you.
Thank you, Ross.
I can promise you, if we went to our regulators and said, all we're going to do for our hemp banking program is require a copy of the hemp bankers, the hemp business's license, we would not have a program. If it was that easy, there would not be so many banks on the sidelines.
Well, I think that's exactly, it speaks to, the policy or the difference in, fiber variety and the testing requirements. There's this big gray area that then banks are held liable for, or to mitigate that risk or understand that risk. And that's where I think it goes back to the due diligence, and the time spent or the money cost, is allocated for the time that's spent, not to file the paperwork.
Yeah, right. The other thing, Tim, I would say is, bank regulators are people. Hemp's been federally legal since 2018 Farm Bill. Law enforcement are people too, but there have been local law enforcement agencies that have raided hemp farms. Perfectly legal product. So there are bank regulators, again, to Kristin's point, that don't understand it. And they are not going to be friendly to our bank if they don't feel like we have a program in place that satiates their desire to make sure we know what we're doing, and we're not policing the industry. We don't feel like it's our responsibility to police the industry, but we are required to really know our customers in any industry, to know our customers and understand what they're doing. But that doesn't mean we're going to police them. I mean, the analogy I use is every bank in the country has restaurants in their customer base, but they're not doing the health inspections. And we view it kind of the same way. We're not policing the industry, but we are required to understand, as Kristin said earlier, the industry and our specific customers.
I have a question and I'm actually curious from Tom and Ashley as well, feel free to chime in here, but when you guys are speaking to banks and educating, Kristin, like you said, banks, what is it that, what is that piece that we as processors or farmers need to be prepared? What is that missing piece of information that maybe the association can also lend to on the education side? Yeah, I'm curious from you guys on what is that missing gap. And it's hard because, Ross, you're in this space so much, and Ashley, you're talking about it so you guys understand it, but.
Yeah, and that boils down to that I don't know what I don't know, right? For me. So I think, if we could collaborate together on doing some education pieces that we could deliver to these institutions and have readily available for them to understand specific industry sectors. I do my best to really break them down for them, but when you try to cover every industry sector in 45 minutes on a webinar, you get a little bit cramped up, it's not enough time to really help them understand. So I think there's really room for us to collaborate together on, okay, can we help them really understand what a processor does, and help them understand they're not usually the end player here. They're that middleman, right? They take the hemp, process it, and give it to, give it back or sell it, whatever. Really helping them understand how each sector works is a better way of saying answering that I don't know what I don't know question.
Yeah, and I think for the level of understanding is similar to the level of understanding in the general public. I mean, I've talked to a lot of bankers who have some degree of understanding, just as there some people in the general public that have some degree of understanding. But I've also talked to bankers that don't know the difference between hemp and high THC. So I think it's even in a lot of cases a baseline of understanding. So there's not going to be a one size fits all for educating the industry, but I think you got to start with how most of us in the general public have had to learn about the industry, and start with understanding the difference between hemp and high THC, and then all the different segments within the industry, as Kristin's talking about. And we're trying to help educate as well. I mean, Kristin and I went to the North Carolina Bankers Association conference a couple of months ago and presented to bankers there. So, as a bank, we think it will serve the industry well to have more banks in the space, and we are happy to help educate other bankers to that end.
Ashley and Tom, do you guys have anything else? I mean, even speaking to like the investment side, as you guys also are looking at, companies that are looking for investment, what is that missing gap?
Yeah, Ross, do you want to?
Or Ashley, yeah, Tom.
I can chime in on this for a second, or my thoughts on this. So we've come across, certainly on the payment side, a lot of companies who either raise money or they're in the process of raising money. And one of the things that does pop up in the due diligence of their investor is, who are you banking with, who are you doing your payment processing with, and how stable are those programs? Because frankly, that's their cash flow, especially if they're in an e-commerce environment. That's their, really that's their cash register. And so with us, and obviously with Westtown Bank and Westtown Payments being basically a unified front, where the bank and both the payment company are out there in the industry doing presentations like this and letting folks know how we support the industry, it gives them a better leg up in obtaining that investment, because they do have a solid, consistent banking partner. If they show where they've had to shut down their merchant account or get their bank account shut down, and they're no longer able to take payments for so much time, and then they're able to get an account back up, and then they lose that account. I'm sure a bunch of operators on this presentation can tell the horror stories of how they had to go get a new bank account, or a merchant account, or an offshore merchant account that, the fees doubled overnight. These are problems. And so, we feel like by putting that message out there, by marketing our program, letting the world know what we're doing, it's obvious that, this is not a fly-by-night program, and that helps these businesses gain a financial security on their banking and payments. And so it can't be stressed enough that if you can't collect on your goods you're selling, you're not going to be in business very long.
Yeah, just the only other thing I would add to investments, when you talk about investments, I gather, don't only put words in your mouth, but I gather you're talking primarily about credit extension.
On any of it, anybody that's going to look for capital or money or revenue, right? And it's this education. And Tom kind of leaned on this, like, as soon as you say my bank account was shut down, anybody that's not in our industry is like, wait, what? You've got bad banking practices, or you've got something wrong, or.
But from a credit standpoint, to be clear, credit is still very challenging in the hemp industry, and there are a variety of reasons for that. One of which is that a lot of the businesses are fairly new, don't have a long track record. A lot of them started after the Farm Bill. I think most people on this call are aware of the challenges in the industry and the glut of inventory. And that has created some challenges for some of the businesses. So even a portion of what track record a lot of the businesses do have has been challenged, and those are certainly germane to credit decisions. Now, the good news is that the SBA and USDA do have protocols for hemp-related businesses, and we do entertain credit to hemp-related businesses with SBA or USDA guarantees. So it's not impossible, but I also want to be forthright about the fact that it is challenging. It is hard. But I do think, like with most industries, as they evolve and mature, that will get easier and better. We had an SBA, a hemp business with an SBA guarantee that got approved just yesterday. So it can happen.
That's great news. Congrats.
Thank you.
I love hearing that money's moving into our industry, especially through traditional banking practices. Yeah, it's nice to see. Are there any other questions that came in? I want to say thank you very much. I don't know if any of you guys have questions for Kristin or Tom or Ross.
You guys are always welcome to reach out after this, and if you're on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect too. The more the merrier. I love this industry. I truly like it. It's truly near and dear to my heart. And I'm not just saying that. I wouldn't have, put the blood, sweat, and tears I have put into here, even on my own time, to learn the industry, to try to help educate other people on it, and know that we're trying to get banks to do the right thing, to not be a burden to you guys, but to also cover their own expectations. So it's important to me that you guys have the same type of opportunities that other businesses do. It's just taking time to get banks to get on board.
Thank you. Carlos, I saw you had your mic off for a minute. Do you guys have a question?
Yeah, we're Mandi, that we're planning to crop in Costa Rica, foreign country, Colombia, foreign country. And we are trying to put together a program with American machinery technology here. How can we raise money through American investors and through American banks? That's our main question right now.
Those are good questions.
And maybe a trust.
Carlos, first, mucho gusto.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm here with Katrina, my partner. Hello. And Salomon. Hi. That he's from Costa Rica, and we are very happy that the government has moved forward. So we were all expecting that. I know that Costa Rica is a known country for an American investment, but hemp in the area, we are scared about the banking.
Yeah, I'll answer that quickly, and if other folks need to drop off, we certainly understand, but I'm happy to stay on and entertain whatever questions people have. And Mandi, I know you got plenty going on too, so I don't want to force you to make the call go longer than you can. But Carlos, a couple of things about that. One, from an equity investment standpoint, I'm going to plug the Global Hemp Association a little bit here. I see a lot of engagement on their hemp hallway of people connecting, including people needing capital and people looking for capital. And so I would encourage involvement in that way. It's a good resource for just putting the question out there and saying, here's what we're doing, who has interest in talking. I'll give you an example. I've got a customer that is about to harvest a significant amount of hemp and was able to help him connect with a potential buyer through that hemp hallway. So I would reference that. From a credit standpoint, I don't want to speak for all banks. I'll speak for ours, and I think it's going to be fairly common. Loans from a U.S.-based bank to a foreign business are typically going to be a challenge. We do have some business with U.S.-based subsidiaries of foreign-owned companies. So we have been able to do that, but loans to that, loans in that scenario are a challenge.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt you there. We're also based in the US, and
Okay.
we're basically in the moment of structuring everything legally. So we have several companies. We have a bioplastic company where we're going to be, doing some trials with hemp, and we're thinking of putting an umbrella type structure and having all our companies underneath it. But the umbrella type structure is going to be incorporated in the US.
Okay.
So
Okay.
would that be an option?
It might be, we would have to investigate how the SBA would view that, because again, we do, for now, for loans to hemp businesses, we do exclusively, we work exclusively with SBA or USDA guarantees, but we were happy to float that to see what their level of interest would be. And it does make it more possible for sure.
Wonderful. And we have also, just to add, just because I wanted to make a comment to you, we have our company Columbia Hemp International LLC in the US, based out of Delaware. We've had, our operation successfully for 2 years now. So, we would like to consider your bank as well for our operation.
Super.
The US.
Super. We'd love to talk with you. My information's in the chat, and
Yep, got it.
we'd love to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, there was a question on here. Is there a difference in what bankers want to know when onboarding merchants for business banking accounts versus onboarding merchant for credit card processing? For credit card processing, it makes sense that the different bank compliance requirements because of the credit card issues. What are the underwriting departments different?
Actually, a great question. So a couple things specific to Westtown Bank and Westtown Payments, and then I can talk more in general. So the way our program is set up, because we are so closely tied to the bank, we have every merchant who's applying with us set up a DDA with the bank. And then that there's a couple of reasons we're doing that. One, we're a product of the bank. We're a service. So just like wire service, ACH, merchant service is just the product. So once you pass the KYC and AML of the bank, then which is the vetting process for the DDA, it opens up all the other services. So what we do is then take the information you've already provided to the bank, and then we'll ask the merchants about their business model. Really, what we care about is what are you selling and what are you saying is really the questions that we're going to ask from the payment side. And that goes to their point about the card brands. They have certain rules around, and actually in the presentation it mentions making claims, saying, our product cures cancer. Okay, that's a problem. And so those are the questions we're going to ask. The bank asks those too, but we really dial more on the business model on the payment side. How are you taking payments? Why are you taking payments? And so it's a natural extension of the information the bank gathers. So by doing that process, they'll obtain a bank account with the bank. They'll get a merchant account. They'll get their funds faster. Also, one thing it does is, because of the way we work together, as a merchant goes and grows, a lot of the industry, especially e-commerce with CBD, a really well-placed, interview on a celebrity show with an influencer or blog post will drive huge traffic, huge volume spikes. And so in a traditional environment, that merchant would probably have their funds held, or they'd have a lot of questions from risk. But because we're tied to the bank so closely, we can see that, we can see what's going on, we can see what's going on in their bank account. And if everything looks good, we just keep moving forward with them. And so a lot of the normal kind of fits and struggles that these merchants find, they don't have with us, because we work so closely with the bank, where a lot of other payment providers in the space are not directly connected to the bank and don't have that. So a long answer, short question, but generally speaking, we leverage the same information. And because of our relationship with the bank, we don't have to ask the merchant for it again, we just get the same file that the bank used to open up the commercial account, and then we go. If we're just doing a merchant account, for argument's sake, then we would need to find out all that information. We'd have to prove, their identity. We'd have to make sure about the, their AML, money laundering issues that we have to clear ourselves. And then we got to ask the other question. So it really is a nice process we've developed, and we feel like we get a lot of value once they're at the end of the process. But generally speaking, we can take the same packet of information and use it for both groups.
And I'll give a little plug, unsolicited. We bank with these guys and run our processing, and they're fabulous. Their team is fabulous. Like I said, I run on Costa Rica time, and you're all patient, and yeah, it's been great. And so I always tout all the time the opportunity, not just in the banking aspect, but the customer service relationship that's behind it has been very valuable for us. So thank you very much. What is the landscape looking like for D8, D10, HHC, et cetera, as far as processing? I'm assuming banking and processing, Monica. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about.
Sure, I can talk about the processing, and then I'll let Sloan, Ross or Ashley talk about the banking. But and again, because we're a product of the bank or service of the bank, we go as the bank goes, and the policies the bank sets, and what we find acceptable. We do have a great collaboration. So we spend a lot of time talking about what we see in the market from our side, what they see legislatively. Currently, we are offering payment services to merchants selling D8, HHC, D10, but they're on a case-by-case basis. And really, what we need to vet the client or the potential client for is their ability to manage and navigate the rules that are out there. There's certain states that have either outlawed it, other states have put it in their high THC program. They have to navigate that and have to be able to show us that they have the ability to navigate it. They can't be unfortunately, they just can't be a one-person shop trying to sell all over the country. And because we just unfortunately have seen where they just don't have the resources to support all the rules that they have to navigate. Ross, I'd love to get your thoughts on, if anything I missed, frankly, or anything as far as the bank looks at those products.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it largely. I would just say that we do not actively pursue customers that are selling hemp-derived THC isomers, but we will entertain them selectively. And we do so for all the reasons that Tom mentioned. And one of the things that we do require in that scenario is an attorney's opinion letter stating that the products that the customer is selling are legal and why, and also explaining what protocols are in place to ensure that the products are being manufactured and sold to people in states where those products are legal. Because so to Tom's point, we want to make sure they have protocols in place to make sure they're doing it right.
Cool. I don't know if there's any other questions. We're almost up on time, or I guess we are over on time, and I want to be respectful of everybody that's speaking. But if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to holler. I would love to collaborate or maybe further the discussion on what education or continued education would look like. Sure. Maybe working to help educate some of the banks and giving, some of our industry leaders an opportunity to say, hey, here's what we have, or you and I can put something together that is presentable. But yeah, I would love to work on that, because I think I personally have experienced it. I was saying the other day, I was giving a presentation about the industrial applications, and as soon as I said the word cannabis, it ended our conversation. Yeah. And so it was I was like, wait a minute, and so but that type of stuff, just with a hemp 101 almost, or, cannabis 101, what is it? And I would love to participate with you and help spread. I know that's something that our needs. So
happy to help anyway.
Awesome. Okay, well, any other questions before I hang up or we hang up? We'll kind of leave it. Thank you very, very much. Again, for everybody else that's on. Tom, I hope you're going to be speaking potentially at the Utah Can event.
I did get the call. Our friend Joel reached out, and I couldn't resist. That's that event is near and dear to my heart. At least, you know, the previous incantation of it a couple of years ago, before pre-COVID. So I'm hoping the same turnout this year. So that was pretty awesome.
Yes, well, it'll be exciting. I'm really excited to participate and bring a panel there for the industrial applications, and so it'll be fun.
I might get Ross out west too. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, good.
Good to be with everybody.
Rosses.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was gonna
Dave?
say Ross is a good travel companion. You know, we've been here, there, and everywhere for the hemp on hemp farms and in crazy places. So yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. For any of you that are going to be or thinking about going to NOCO, we would love to have you. They just upgraded our rooms and facility from the Crown to the Gaylord, which is a beautiful facility in Colorado, at the end of March. And we're doing an awards banquet. I see some of you on here have been nominated. And so get your tickets, take your carrier. Yeah, make sure that you get there. I'm really excited to highlight people. But we're doing an awards banquet on Thursday. And then, of course, the trade show. What is it, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Joanne?
Yes, they have a pre-conference on Wednesday and then Thursday, Friday, the main show. And just a reminder with lodging, if you haven't purchased your lodging, today is the last day to get the discount. So if you're gonna stay at the Gaylord, definitely get in now. It's a fantastic rate for that hotel. So today's the last day.
They honored our other pricing, and so it's pretty
Yeah.
great.
That is great.
Cool. Okay, well, any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Joanne or I. We appreciate your support. We're actively seeking members and memberships, so please, support what we're doing. Thank you, Ross, and your team, and Tom, for everything you do to support GHA. It's greatly appreciated.
No, thank
All
you,
right.
guys.
Thanks to everybody. Have a great evening.
Hi, guys.
See ya.
Thank you, guys. See you later. Carlos, see you at the beach.